Everyone, do you think that Savage Worlds novice characters are maybe too generic? They're not differentiated enough. They're not interesting till they get to higher ranks. Well, let me tell you, there's things you can do to make your novice characters more interesting without just throwing stuff at them. It's a savage world, strange as a wind wolf. Hey everyone, I'm Carl with Eric.
Hello.
And we're Tabletop Tango, look at the bubbles, do the things. Already got a little bit support. I appreciate it. I'm going to throw some money at some Savage World stuff and talk about it, so I appreciate all the help there. And we're just enjoying doing it, and thanks for watching. Today, we want to talk about, I don't know, not really a controversial topic, but sometimes people talk how novice characters aren't as interesting. Maybe you should give them more ranks or more advances so that they can be more interesting. But I think, personally, I think novice characters can be interesting. But then there's some things you can do. There's different ways of looking at it that can make them interesting, add more flavor, add more, make them, I guess the whole point is my character doesn't feel like my character yet at a novice because they only have one edge or they only have a few things like that. Right? That's kind of where we're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more nuance to this. I mean, let's say up front, it is a little bit controversial. I mean, I think it's been a consistent criticism of Savage Worlds. I often see, I've just straight up seen it from other people who've tried it and think, oh, no, Savage Worlds, I don't like, it's all so samey when you start. So it's been a criticism in the community. They did better with Suede. I still think it's around. I've been in groups where they pretty much always give you more for novice because they just don't think it. And I've been in groups that just don't care. So I've seen both sides. And I think I have my personal opinion. You have your personal opinion. But I do think there's more nuance to this than just can you or can't you? Because I think there's much more to it than people think or they do think. But yeah, that's what we're here to talk about.
That's what we're here for. Yep. So let's talk about, so just to set the stage, I'm a little bit more, I like novice characters. I know they're not, again, some folks think they're not as interesting, but I like starting there because it gives the players some place to go. It's good for, I even play with groups who are, they've played Savage Worlds for a while and they're still you give them a bunch of advances to start and they're looking at their sheet going, I don't remember what this does. And I got to look up this edge again. Yeah. And it gives them a chance to kind of grow into their character. And who knows, what you think the character is going to be at the beginning might be something different. But I completely get that, for folks who don't pick the right hindrances and really play them up from a role play standpoint, they might feel that their mechanical part of it, the edges, the skills, maybe don't give them the feel of, I'm a swashbuckling pirate and, basically I still got fighting and I've got, one edge that I picked.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things to talk about here. Certainly, if newer players, it's not always the best option. I do feel, though, for me personally, I'd always like more stuff starting. I've also played Savage Worlds a lot. So, yeah, for me, it helps because let's talk about one thing there you brought up we're talking about character personality traits versus the mechanical expression of a character. Now this kind of relates to our optimization video a bit, but can you play a novice Savage Worlds and have people be different? Of course you can. I don't think there's any argument about that, and some of that is just character personality. But two fighters might feel very samey from the beginning. There's just not a lot of combat edges that are novice anyways. And often a character concept you might have might not, you're not going to feel that way until you have more stuff under your belt. Often, because there's a lot of stuff locked behind seasons. You're not starting with enough stuff, I think, generally, to usually express that. You can obviously role play that way. But on the mechanical sides, I don't, are you a person who does melee? Yeah, that's easy, right? You take some fighting, maybe take one edge or something, you have good strength. But beyond those kind of basics, or if you want to play more kind of jack of all trades or a little bit diverse, you have two things going on, I don't think there's enough. But I think that leads on to other things, and we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about, like we said, it doesn't have, plenty of groups can get by with it, but where's ones that you think there's definitely situations where you should give, right? I don't think there's much of that, or that's really good to give more options to.
No, I
so
totally,
let's list some of those.
I think there's definitely there's a feel for when you talk about the genre or the kind of setting or the kinds of things you want the players to be doing initially.
Yes.
If obviously you don't want a game where they're walking around killing rats so they could get experience to actually do something interesting. But
no,
but so it really depends on, I think, that setting. So I don't know. There's some pretty obvious ones that are like, jacked up power all over the place. Things like rifts and even a good cyberpunk game. There might be a lot of need to have a lot of capability up front because your background is, you're an elite hacker who's in the underground. And then if you start off as novice and, you're really not effective. However, if the game is based on you're a nobody from the street growing into something impressive. So it really does now depend on the kind of setting. Now, the superhero, where you guys played gods, that obviously you had a little bit extra juice because we built it into sort of the background of how things were set up, even though you were quote unquote novice. But I think that's what you're trying to talk about. There's ways to juice it, but even to make it more interesting.
Yeah, and I think we'll get back to this, but even before settings, like doing some stuff like if your just characters are just more experienced, if they're expected to have a lot of training, be more experienced, you're probably going to need more than that. If you have a very small party, right, then you might want to give them a little bit extras. And this, we're not always talking about advances here, but like maybe extra skill points and stuff. So even without considering setting, I think there's times where you might want to give them more stuff just because they need to be either based on the type of story that you're telling, or if it's like a smaller party size. Those are options. But yeah, setting, I think, impacts it hugely. The scope of the setting, the type of setting it is. I mean, you brought up some examples, but yeah, like Rifts obviously gives you tons of stuff, and you feel very distinct when you play Rifts. Superheroes, and getting back to our God game, but superheroes just gives you more, you have the normal Savage World stuff, and you have superpowers, which can definitely affect how you, not just combat-wise, but can also affect how you play the game, like what your roles are, That gives you more stuff. Cyberpunk, certainly. And even talking about Cyberpunk, it's funny, most of your games, we have had more stuff. I mean, if you think about Interface Zero, they give you more cyberware to start. Like, they give you cyberware. And our game with the gods, besides, even before we got god powers, we were expected to be more experienced runners. So we started out with more experience.
Well, you almost started off, we leveraged a lot of riffs.
It's almost seasoned.
And so you guys already have the riffs stuff, and then we packed on top of it.
Yeah, we already had some riff stuff. Yeah. So when we weren't seasoned, we did already have stuff. So, and that was because, distinct from the god powers, that was like, we're already doing stuff in the city. We're already established somewhat. And that helped get the ball running, right, in that game. So it made sense for that game. Pathfinder, right? Even Savage Pathfinder. I mean, they could have just had a class edges and just said, if you want to take a class edge, take a class edge. They actually gave you that class edge on top of normal stuff because it maybe felt too restrictive to just have it as an optional thing. Mm-hmm. Something like Monster Hunters Club, right? That we like that set. I mean, it's very tropey, so it makes sense, but they give you some more stuff than normal to really set, oh, this is my character trope,
Yeah,
and I think there's definitely
in that game they go really to the you're picking a character type with all the things, and then you can tweak it inside, and when you're done, it doesn't feel like it's a super advanced character. It still feels novice-y, but man, there's so much stuff that you pick from to make the your jock to be a certain way, or your brainiac in class to feel a certain way. So it's definitely added some flavor there. But I just want to step back. So to make sure, there's places, right, where the setting demands it. Like you mentioned, if you got a small party size, that's where you've got like a skill gap or a capability gap. You've only got 2 people. Yeah. And I did campaigns with 2 people, but they were much modern day. So, you got the Bonnie and Clyde, you've got the 2 agents. And so it works out because they can have all the people in the back room helping them out. But in a lot of games, you don't have that, right? So you're kind of on your own, and you need to have that filled up. So, okay.
And I think let's talk about the other part of like modern settings or something, like the additional skill setting rule. Like if you're in a setting that has a ton of skills, extra skills, then and there's more things that players need to be doing, I think that also affects it. And when we talk about novice characters, and we'll talk about this at the third part of this video, it's not, when we say giving novice characters more stuff, it's not always advances. So, giving them more skill points, that kind of thing. More core skills, right? That's something that you talked about before we started the video. So those are other ways that you're just giving people to make them feel more distinct, because often you have to make sacrifices when you're making a novice character. You can't, if you take a certain edge to really make you feel like you're doing something a certain way, then you have to sacrifice some type of skills, even a D4. But there's a balancing act, and that's good. For sure. But I think Savage Worlds it can have a lot of skills and have a lot of edges and a lot of things that you can do that you're never going to be, that often you're not going to feel like it's too much just by throwing the players the bone, I think, sometimes. Like in our game now that you're running, right? You started that as seasoned.
Yes. Yes.
My character, like I would not have been able to make my character, I had to like almost scientifically measure it. And, my character has no fighting. That was a conscious choice by me because he wasn't going to be good at that regardless. But I didn't even give him a D4 because I just couldn't spare it. To me, him having a cult of a D4 was more important because there was nobody on the team. That was kind of his character type, right? So starting at seasoned was like, for me, that was like almost, that was the most I could do just to have that base feel for my character. Like to make Tomislav how he is, it would be hard, almost impossible for me to do it at novice. I still would have had his personality, but it wouldn't feel the same way playing.
And that's a key point we went back to, right, is I like novice-y characters, but in this case, sitting down and looking at Lost Colony, the Deadlands Lost Colony, even though there's nothing in the book that says, hey, you should start characters with more advances, it's a rough world. People have to have a lot of experience living out there in the wild before they became whatever it was, because you guys weren't, we weren't starting with you guys being farmers deciding to travel to wastelands. Each one of you had a rich backstory, and that's part of, like you said, to make that rich backstory make sense, right? There's that classic funny thing, and somebody writing your backstory for a game, and they saved the world 3 times, but now they're a first level adventurer. Right? I mean, for you guys to do what you needed to do, like Tomislav with. He was a gambler on Earth and did this stuff, and he got involved with the mob or whatever, and all this stuff happened. He's had to grow a lot through that, right? So,
yeah. Cool. So I mean, I think we've covered, like, setting is hugely important, right, to this, and what the game master wants to do. So, say you decided that I want to give the player something, right? I think we've talked about this before now, is that it's not always advances, but let's talk about the different ways of doing it. So let's start with giving them more advances to start, like kind of the pros and cons.
That's the easy solution. I just throw advances at them, and then they can, distribute how they want and get that character flavor. Yep, that's easy. That's the easy way of doing it. But then
what's the pros and the cons?
Well, the con I'll start with is that means everything else they're running into has to ratchet up to right away.
Okay.
To that, which I guess that's expected even when we make the other part of the character. But that for advances, that's really pretty straightforward. You're now tougher than you were before and have more capability. You're going to go against more capable people. If that's not really what the story's trying to tell, well, then it's kind of a con, right? They're wading in.
Yeah.
When, I'm just saying it's a little bit of con. The pro, of course, is you get all that chance to, all the edges that people, I know when people start off as novice, they're drooling over these seasoned edges out there. It's like, once I get to season, then I can finally take that one. And it gives them that chance to have that fulfillment right away. So that's a big pro, obviously.
Yeah. And I mean, your con kind of applies to all of these, all of them were if we're talking about different ways of doing it, they're all getting something extra. So they're going to have more capability in some way. But there's other, you could also do it where it's not necessarily direct combat capability. It could just be more diversity, right? So if you're giving them more skills, that while they could be better at fighting or something, or what they're good at shooting, usually if there's a character that's like, I'm a shooter or I'm a fighter, they're taking their skill die up to the max or even one above their attribute cap, right? But giving them more skill points, they're not getting more attribute points. So they still have those attribute caps. So they're probably going to become more diverse generally, the more powerful, So with advances, and generally we think of this as like you start at seasons. Because, starting at heroic or veteran just seems a little too much. But like, for me, the pros of this are Yeah, I mean, you're getting those. It's easy to do from a game master standpoint. You're getting they're getting them more options, but they still have the restrictions of advances. And while they have one option for a seasoned edge, so a lot of the combat edges and power edges open up at seasoned. It's only one, right? For me, the big con that I see for this specific thing is that you're just going to get the legendary that much faster.
Yep.
And that's, for me, that's the biggest con of this method. Now, there's things that you can do as a game master where you can, generally you might slow down getting advances anyways, getting closer to legendary, but you can start that slowdown earlier. Or I think what we're kind of doing in yours is like the first 3 or 4 advances, maybe you definitely only do 3 sessions to 4 sessions each. So just to kind of make up the time. So when you look at the end of the campaign, it ends in the same, like the characters end in the same way they would have, but you've just kind of like given them that seasoned first and then spread out the advances between maybe seasoned and veteran or something a little bit more. So it equals the same, but you've just given them that extra boost in the beginning. So that's the way I think.
And I think most of my campaigns, I think the ones that you were in, at least, you guys ended up at veteran, right?
Or legendary, right?
You got to legendary 1. So I think that makes the point is that arc, that the story and all the things you were doing in there. Some of them you started on novice. You still got to pretty skilled. So if you're starting a little more skilled or capable, right, and you're starting at seasoned, if you've got the same story to tell, you just got to be recognizing that you are going to have to control, in certain cases, the rate. Otherwise, I think people get the legendary and there's stuff you can do afterwards, I guess. But I think legendary gets kind of boring. Yeah. So hopefully, you've told the story or the players have told the story because it's a shared narrative.
Yeah.
By then, right? So personal opinion.
I mean, the funny thing is when you still get the legendary, there's still tons of edges and and again, if a setting that you're doing is adding a lot of stuff, then that just makes it. But yeah, you're still like, oh, I'm at legendary. I feel this way. You're at the, the power creep is at the end there. So for sure, you want to slow that down. So another way of doing this is just instead of giving specifically advances, right? Just giving some extra character creation points, or like how Cyberpunk does it. They would just give you, because they have or Interface 0, right? And because they have cybernetics, they just give you more cybernetics to start. And there's like a thing where if you're really like, remember they had a thing where like if you're like from the street, totally the street, then you get crappy cybernetics. If you're kind of mid-range, you get this. And so kind of doing the sliding scale like that. So there's always that option of not technically giving advances, just giving, an extra edge to start, or an extra skill points, like we talked about the extra skill point rule or whatever. So what about the pros and cons of this method?
Well, I think the big pro, and we've done this a couple times, right? In the Interface 0, there was stuff in the Gods game, the Gods game. We rewrote a whole bunch of rules to make it give the people that feel of capability. Like, vigor is not it's not one half of vigor to get your toughness. It was just your vigor, right? We've made some tweaks. What's good about that is you can really tailor it to the feel of what you're trying to do in the system. It's not, carte blanche just to pick anything. It's really based on what you're trying to make the feel, like Cyberpunk, right? Yeah, having a piece of cyberware, it can be taken away, it can be lost. Yeah, hopefully not, but it gives you something that you didn't have before, and I think that's more. Now for me, that's more interesting. You're still more capable, but you still got a bigger growth path. You're not just I've gone through the book and I've done my shopping cart full of all the cool stuff that I want to do.
Yeah, and it's definitely, on this way, you don't have to maybe moderate the advances as much as you would for starting a higher rank. One thing that you can do with this too is say if you gave an extra edge and some extra skill points, there's another way that you can add to this is by doing the Born a Hero rule. Where I think, me and you, I think we both kind of agree on that one. Just don't allow legendary, but you could allow legendary. Yeah. That really allows, though, to characters like, and we talked about this in my powers guide, and you even brought that up. You brought that up, Carl, as a note. Is that like the zombie power, right? It's a great power. It's one of my favorite minion powers, but it's a veteran power, and the same thing in Pathfinder. So if you really want to be a necromancer, it's a little tough to wait for that before you get your undead minions, right. And whatever we could argue about mechanical balance, but if you gave somebody the Born the Hero rules, they could maybe pick that up beginning and then really feel like they're a necromancer. So I think I would slot Born a Hero into this kind of mode, or this method, I guess. If you gave them an extra edge to start, or some extra skill points, also doing the Born to Hero would really let them cherry pick one thing from higher up that would then fully kind of solidify
obviously have that conversation,
that feeling.
Have that conversation to be sure before that, so that it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't unbalance game. It's like, I think what was the one? There was a recent one that we did it. It was like I allowed you to
Singularity.
Let you take a power.
Yeah.
That was outside of the novice, and then you pick fly.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that throws a monkey wrench and everything. It's like, well, now I got to think about what that means. You don't start on the ground crawling around. Well, it's fine. That's I figured it out. It's great. It made for a lot of fun.
And that was a modern setting that had guns, so it wasn't like I was avoiding combat or anything. But yeah, I mean, that was cool because I used that for powers. Other people took some certain things to get some better abilities. So that was cool. I think the con for me for this one is that while you don't have that like getting to legendary quicker, while you're at legendary, you're going to have somebody who's more powerful than if you just started at seasons, because they're going to have more abilities starting. So this method is they're just going to be more powerful than normally. Which is not necessarily a con, because if that's the kind of game you're running, that's fine. But that's just something to consider with this method. Right? Any other cons for you, or is that just kind of?
I like this method more than just throwing rank at people. At
somebody.
Right. I mean, but again, like you said, that's easier. One of the cons here is it is harder. So you got to, as a game master who's bringing this in, you got to think about balance already. And that's why I mentioned fly, right? If that completely blew out of the water, anything I was trying to do, like, people had to stay in the ground because there was bird people. You guys ran into the bird people, but there's bird people, and, they have to have the high ground, but here's a player who changes that. Well, you got to, as a game master, you either have to, roll with that punch, change things, which I would recommend more than just telling people no. But that's the con, is it has to be tailored to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that may be difficult, right? From an experience standpoint, versus the easy thing is just say, give them some advances. So, okay.
Yeah. Now, and again, like a thing that I would like games that do this are like Interface Zero. I would say Savage Pathfinder, right? They give you that free class edge that really makes you feel like you're a certain class. So those are the kind of settings that do this. Now, moving on to basically the archetype system. And this is things that you see in Rifts. This is things that you see like in Monster Hunter Club, I would say. There's definitely some other games. One game that we were, I don't know if we can talk about it, but a preview that we got kind of does this. So there certainly is a lot of games that do this. This one definitely gives you more than the other two, this gives you a very preset amount based on like a trope or something specific that, right? Or like a character type. And this gives you a bunch of abilities and unique abilities that are not even edges, right? This is the one that's probably the most in depth, that usually comes in official settings, but you can do it as your own setting too. But generally that's what you get with archetypes, right? They're like a bunch of stuff thrown for a certain type of character and then often unique things.
And they call them in Rifts, they call them frameworks, right? And some
frameworks, but they're archetypes. I mean, whatever. Yeah, call them whatever you want. That's basically what they are. So how do you feel about these?
Well, I think what's nice about them is what's nice about this concept, if you have a setting that already has archetypes, tropes like Monster Hunter Club does.
Yeah,
it does. It's funny that it limits choice in some ways. Hear me out, though.
Yeah.
And it limits choice in some way because you're picking, I'm like this thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like in Monster Hunters Club, I am the geeky science guy. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you pick a bunch of stuff that slots in that makes you feel very unique. But part of that is that there's a party, there's going to be the geeky science guy, and then someone else is going to be the jockey person, and someone else is going to be the, born, has power innate and is trying to figure it out. You're not going to have like four sciencey guys. So having that trope that you can go pick that is the thing in your brain is a good thing, because somebody's already balanced it. They already thought how that all works out. Like Savage Pathfinder, these class edges are supposed to kind of balance out so that when you're picking that trope, I want to be a wizardy person. Okay, well, here's the stuff that makes you a wizardy person. And the expectation, I think, is that the party tends to be more rounded. But you do get to feel like the thing you wanted to be from a trope, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think these will make you feel the most distinct out of any of the other options that we've talked about. Yeah, definitely. And then so con-wise, I think, so I agree with everything that you said. Con-wise, I mean, it's either the most work if you're doing this on your own, and it's going to be, this is going to be the most power. Like you said, you're going to have some limited choices here, even though it makes you feel the most. It's still Savage Worlds though, so you still have options to, it's still, in any of the settings I've seen, none of them are like, well, there's a clear progression. No, you take your initial stuff and then you have, your options. You can do whatever you want with your advances, right? So
which is one of the huge, I think, benefits of Savage Worlds is there's not that,
for sure.
Way back in the first early D&Ds where you didn't have skills and edges and stuff, it was all, what you could do is just kind of bait until I get the third level. I'm just generic fighter guy. Oh, and then I get something else, but all generic fighter guys get this. So it was like the way of the other extreme. But anyway.
Yeah, so Savage Worlds is still flexible, but this is obviously limiting choice in some way, but it's going to make you feel the most distinct. But you're also going to be, this gives the most, usually, right? This is going to give probably the most stuff. And it is going to limit choice somewhat. But, in some ways this might even be easier for new players to do. I mean, they have less stuff, but it also is like, here's a very clear path to the kind of character that you want to play.
And so players can they understand the tropes, right? I mean, so they're picking a trope. They're picking
unless it's riffs.
What?
Unless it's riffs, because that shit's crazy.
Yeah, that riffs is like this other entity over here. In the Venn diagram of stuff, it tries to not be part of that Venn diagram. So,
sorry, I interrupted you about that. Yeah, riffs is fine. Go ahead.
So, I don't think I really had an important point. It's okay.
My bad. I thought it was comical to be like, riffs though.
Yeah. So is there anything else? Because I kind of can summarize it a little bit. Because we talked a bunch of stuff. There's reasons. There may be some reasons why you don't want to do it, but if you want to do it, there's you only have so many players in the party. You want players to feel distinct and interesting and unique. There's ways of doing it besides I think people come into it and say, I just need to throw more advances at you. Here, have a few advances and now you'll feel good. There's other ways of doing it, right?
So what's your favorite method? I think we're probably in agreement here. Out of the three methods that we talked about, I think, right? I think my favorite method is the second one, the giving additional kind of skills or edges at the start, not advances, and maybe doing Born a Hero with your GM. I think that's my favorite method of doing it. Which, is that yours too? Or?
Well, I don't think I would necessarily just roll in Born a Hero, but
no, not
specifically thinking about the things that the players want to be, right? They have a vision in their head, and then tailoring some things extra you can give them based on what they're trying to do. I agree. It's not go crazy. It's here's some stuff, and some settings do this really well. Like we harp on Monster Hunters Club all the time, but it does it really, really well. I think that's better. And I think that borns out of experience in the sense of like when we did the Gods game, we spent a lot of time thinking about to be a god, what does that mean you over like a normal person other than just, throwing skills and throwing edges at you.
Superpowers.
There was something superpowers. There was something that made that interesting for people. But then I've also played games with just the core rules, nothing, started at Novice, but there was a reason for it. And people, they didn't know what they wanted to be when they grew up. So I gave them a chance to kind of grow into that.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but maybe not, put in Born a Hero as a baseline.
No, of course.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. What I meant to say, like with the GM, if that was something that you thought might work for the setting or, I do think though, especially taking away the legendary edges, just saying Born a Hero, but not legendary. I do think it opens up there's so many combat edges at seasons, but like for you, like say you love playing a heavy gunner, right? I mean, you're just counting the days until you get rock and roll. You know what I mean? Like you're just counting the days until you get some of the other edges that support that, or whatever. So in some cases, I do think it might be a good thing to consider, without giving the players more stuff, just giving them access to some of those just to start, giving them access to some of those, seasoned stuff, veteran stuff, might make them feel distinct as well. So I think it's also a good way to look at it of, not giving them too much, but still giving them some flexibility.
Well, I mean, the bottom line,
making
it
the character
drives their specialization earlier, right? Because seasoned and veteran, they start to have some real meaty, like rock and roll. If I'm a guy who's running around spraying bullets, rock and roll's a big deal to me. And then I want to get other stuff to get there.
Yeah.
That's a big deal to me. And that makes me, I'm the guy in Alien who's got the gun strapped to my back running around, and that's me. I'm already there, right? So I totally agree with that, because those upper edges do start making people, even if it's not broadly distinct, they've got this niche that they're carving even deeper with the knife. Yeah, for sure. Okay, final thoughts.
Well, cool. I think, I mean, I don't like we said, I think it's going to be different from table to table. Some people are firmly, it doesn't matter. Some people are like, we always do this. I do think with new players, it can go either way. If you have experienced RPG people, even if they've never played Savage Worlds before, they might not balk at getting more stuff, and that might people who are used to a D20 system and classes. I think people who are really into that, right, D&D, Pathfinder, that kind of stuff, they might just balk at like novice characters, think, well, there's not enough stuff here to make me feel like a character. So if somebody's experienced, even if they're new to Savage Worlds, you still might want to consider giving them some more stuff to really feel like that genre. But on the flip side, if there's, it might be too much for them. So it's definitely good to know the players.
Well, and I think, it's up to you as a game master. If you're bringing in experienced players who you're going to give them more stuff, that you help walk them through. Because there's definitely, if you look at all our Edges videos and a bunch of other stuff, there's things that work well together, things that don't. And part of it is you don't learn that as you go. That's one of the cons, right? You're starting, let's just say you use the easy one. And you just say, I use start season. And so they're picking this and they're picking that and they're picking that. And it has happened even in our games that we start playing, and even people who kind of grew through it, they're going, oh, and I should have taken more of this. Well, if you didn't know that's kind of where you wanted to go as you started, you've already made a decision and you're sort of locking yourself into it. So why I'm saying all that is somebody who's coming from another game system, it still might be good to guide them through the decision-making process, even if you're going to let them do more. But maybe that's just common sense. I don't know. So
cool. I think we covered it. Again, we're not like totally saying, I mean, at the beginning, I think like my feelings probably for you are more, you're like, novice is fine. Me personally, because I play more, I'm like, no, give me more stuff, but it's because I play a lot, but I think there is nuance here, right? This is what I said at the beginning. I think there is a lot of ways to look at it, and it's not always one right way, right? It really depends a lot on your game.
Oh, it's always whatever's fun at your table is what's fun at your table, and that's the most important thing. But I think we gave some, we came from a kind of again, I'm more the novice-y, grow them into it. You say, hey, I want some more interesting stuff. And I think bringing that together, you can create interesting characters that are more capable. That's, what the desire is, without just throwing more edges or more ranks at them or whatever, more advances. Yeah. There's things you can do to make them interesting. Some of it's a little more work if it's your setting and you're trying to tweak stuff, but that might make it even richer for the experience. That's what I'm saying. And experience and narrative and fun is what it's all about. So make it interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Carl with Eric. And we are Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles. Do the stuff. Again, support will all go right into buying more stuff that we can talk about. Because we just got done talking about Savage Pathfinder. We've got Rifts. We got, that stuff costs money. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Strangers a weird war. It's a savage world. Classics to explore. It's a savage world.